Good afternoon to everybody here. Welcome to our event today for Education and Resilience, Challenges and Opportunities for Learning and Sustainability. My name is Victoria Walt. I am a journalist in science and technology, and it is a great honor for me to be able to be here with you today, where we will be exploring the complex relationship that exists between education and resilience. Okay, so now we're going to continue in Spanish. We do also want to say hello during this afternoon, the distinguished authorities and representatives that are with us today, to the team for Education Above All, Fundación Chile, and the IDB, to the participants and also the panelists, and all of the people who were invited, and our special guests. We are very excited about this space that we've been able to create, and thanks to a great alliance between the IDB, Education Above All, and Fundación Chile, allows us to be able to analyze how natural disasters and the increase of temperatures affect the learning, the differences in the different strategies that can be used to be able to strengthen resilience in educational systems, as well as the transformative role of education and adaptation and the impulse of new industries. To open up this very relevant conversation, I would like to invite on the stage the host today, Hernán Araneda. He is the General Manager of Fundación Chile. Good afternoon. It is an honor to be able to welcome you this evening. As far as the relevance and as well as the friends who are gathered here today, and the work alliances that are so important, such as the one that we have as Fundación Chile with the IDB, and the exploration with Education Above All, which is another very, very important experience that we're going to be talking about. We would like to thank the IDB for the opportunity to be able to organize this opportunity and this event as a cyber event in such an important topic, where all of the governors of the IDB in Santiago de Chile, and also just the happiness to be able to have so many authorities and special guests here from Ana Maria, as well as so many good friends and partners. Florencia, the representative of the IDB in Chile, as well as Bead Love, which is a partner that we've had for decades. We just actually signed some very important agreements to be able to project our collaborative work that we do with them that we're very happy about. And also all of the friends that are here invited from the education area, the Ministry of Education, and other authorities. So thank you so much for all of your attendance, especially the representatives of the IDB, the Education Above All, the government authorities, and to our international guests, where their view enrich this event. I would also like to say the president of the board, Zamora, and there's also several less of us from here, Fundación Chile. Welcome. So this comes from a conviction that climate change is not just an environmental phenomenon, but also a challenge, which is educational and humane. So in Chile, we believe that it's a transformative role in the formation of our times. And in order to comply with this role, we do need to have, for our educational aspects, to be able to have pertinence with the context of constant change. Extreme heat, natural disasters, loss of water, and the fragility of our structures are the phenomenon's part that is already impacting the educational experience, especially in the most vulnerable places in Latin America and the Caribbean and other regions of the planet where there have also been education problems for years. At the same time, we do see a moment to be able to return to our educational experience, to be able to have sustainability in curriculum, and to be able to strengthen resilience, not just physically, but also emotional, communitarian, and cultural. So this is a space where we can work together from both legal and local and regional areas to be able to have education that prepares education for the world that is coming. Thank you for being a part of this conversation, and I hope that this event is a great opportunity to be able to build alliances, mobilize action, and especially be able to renew our compromise with education, which will allow us to walk towards a more resilient and sustainable future. This is the first seminar that we're doing here in Chile, and I do believe that it is part of the mission that we have to the IDB, Fundación Chile, and other actors to be able to raise these topics that challenge us and that also require very new responses. So welcome again. Thank you so much, also Ednan, for these words, for sharing this house, this Fundación Chile, our area, to be able to also giving this welcome. So up next, I would like to offer this space to Carolina Moreno. She is the Coordinator of Finances and International Affairs of the Minister of Finance in Chile. So we would like to ask her to come up on stage. Carolina, welcome. Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Hernan, for the invitation and to be able to share with everyone here. I see a lot of familiar faces. Dr. Florencia, our IDB director, is here. And as Hernan was mentioning, this is a week that was very intense for everybody. It's very exciting. And we are receiving all of the governance for our meetings, our annual meetings from the IDB assemblies. So everyone is also welcome to those seminars. This is an event that actually is very important to be able to allow new programs and to be able to climb these initiatives or start new initiatives to be able to support public and private initiatives that Ednan was saying earlier. This is a new topic that actually I think might be the first. Hi, how are you? Which we're also seeing in this country. So starting off, just 4 different points that I'd like to touch on. Education is a right. 2, we need coordinated efforts. 3, the need to be able to base ourselves on science to be able to reach the objectives that we have. And 4th, the importance to be able to develop talent. So the first top that I want to talk about is that this is a fundamental right, education. So these are the new challenges that we have. These facing these climates and the natural disasters that are being repeated more and more. So therefore, we do need educational systems that will allow us to be able to face these adversities, that would allow us to adapt, and that will allow us to evolve. Having citizens that are not just more conscious, but also more stronger to be able to make the changes that we need to face this challenge. We do need investment, but not just in physical infrastructure, as well as the capacities, human capacities, to be able to develop the educational systems and levels that would allow us to have more resilience. So we do need capacity and also physical capital, but also human capital that is resilient. So here I go to my second point, which is the need to be able to give coordinated solutions. So not just coordinated between what the public and private or civil society, but also coordinated on a regional level. And with the IDB, we're working together on an initiative that will be able to help us coordinate ourselves on a regional level, not just for the prevention of natural disasters or the reaction towards them, but also the possibility to be able to evaluate, quantify risks, and prepare from a technical perspective, a human perspective, in order to be able to face these new challenges. This cooperation we are seeing on a Latin American and Caribbean aspect, but of course the knowledge and being able to interchange knowledge, technology, and everything that is needed to be able to exchange this valuable information between economies is very necessary. Chile is going to be a co-sponsor of this initiative, and so from here, we are going to be able to trigger something that is very necessary in terms of these efforts. Another point that I wanted to touch on is the importance of having advances and studies, collecting data, and all of this. But the most important thing is that hopefully that it is based on science, and that this mix between science, expertise, and knowledge will allow us to, for example, have data that link them to, for example, mobilization of financing to sustainable environments. We do have to make an effort to be able to measure what is environmentally sustainable. Without that, we won't be able to have transparency in the markets, and that we can be able to identify exactly where we have to move forwards with these investments and how to cover the gap of what is necessary for infrastructure and resilient infrastructure, but also in terms of what the skills are that we need to be able to reach these objectives. So in the case of Chile, it's a little bit more technical perhaps, but we are having a taxonomy that is going to allow us to identify or allow us to classify these activities that are really environmentally sustainable, avoid greenwashing, and be able to direct investments towards these ends. And this also extends to several different areas. So in order to be able to do this type of classification, we do need to base ourselves on technical, objective data that allow credibility in the markets. So this is where I'm kind of talking about the financial market, but also moving towards resilience, and also not just physical infrastructure, but also in our human capital, which is where we can link together with all the efforts to have sustainable education. And so here, the importance of supporting talent with Fundación Chile, we work very well together and very strongly with Valentina, talking about digital talent. And then also what we're talking about here is to be able to gather people to be able to join this initiative. So I would like to thank you, and also highlighting the role of Fundación Chile and of the IDB, and of course education above all, for all of the work that they've been doing and generating these instances and these possibilities for dialogue, and particularly, of course, of the host 50 years of trajectory, and always with the stamp of being able to generate these synergies between the private sector, the public sector, civil society, and taking on other foundations. And from there, such as this program, being able to add knowledge and finally be able to make initiatives where everybody feels identified. In the measure that all of the parts are involved, it's so much more effective. The work that is done is more effective. So thank you very much, and I hope that this is an impeccable event. And welcome to Chile, everybody who have been coming in from abroad, and welcome to this instance to the locals. Thank you.
And now, to continue with this opening ceremony, we'd like to invite to the stage Ana Maria Ibanez, Vice President for Sectors and Knowledge of the IDB, who will give us her welcoming words. Please go ahead and welcome. Well, thank you very much. For me, it's a huge pleasure to be here with all of you in this event. And first of all, I'd like to start off by thanking our host, Hernan Paulo. Thank you so much for hosting us. Fundación Chile has been a partner for IDB for many years and will continue to do so for many years. And also Mr. Mohamed Sal Waisi, Director of Education above all, who we are carrying out this project with. Carola, we've been working together for many days now. Thank you very much for welcoming us. The government of Chile has been there in the assembly, and we're truly happy to be here. We also have many partners in educational projects in our countries. Mauricio Pineda, Minister of Education from El Salvador. Rocio Lee Suarez, Secretary of Education of Brazil, who we hope to carry out an important project with. Joaquin Walker, Ministry of Education of Chile as well. And many thanks to all of you for being here with us today. I'd like to also give a special thanks to the Fundación Chile and Education above all for organizing this event, which is truly important. It's important to start talking about education and resilience, and it's important to talk about this in a more decisive way for our region. So this is important because education is fundamental so that our region can reach the levels of growth and productivity in society that we require. Without education, this won't be possible, and without the accumulation of human capital, it won't be achievable. So in the last 2 decades, when we talk about what happened in Latin America and the Caribbean with education, we've had advances, important advancements in access to education. However, we still need a while to go, a path to follow in quality of education, and also we still have a long way to go in covering the educational gaps, and also resources which are not enough and limited access to education in rural areas. And this educational program on education and resilience plays a role in closing these gaps, especially the digital divide. So if we consider what's happening in natural disasters and extreme heat, this is joined and combined to the structural challenges that we faced for many years. And what this program seeks basically is attacking that gap, the extreme heat, so that we can help many children in the region. So the first thing that we need to ask ourselves to show that it's important, and I'll share with you a few numbers just to talk about this program. In 2023, the heat waves just in Mexico caused the closing of schools in 18 states, affecting 13 million children. Now, if we look at all the children in Latin America and the Caribbean, 50% live in zones of high exposition to heat. So when we double-click on countries like Mexico, Belize, and Paraguay, these numbers go over 70%. So this shows the importance of the program. A study conducted in Brazil shows that students in the 10% hottest schools regions in the country lose 1% learning due to the heat. So the program that we're going to execute here is fundamental. It's exactly necessary to cover the issue of extreme climate and heat so that our children can learn in a better and more effective way. So this is a challenge we're all tackling now with Fundación Educativa, education above all, Qatar. And what we wish to do is to foster the cooperation, education, and the development of skills and abilities. So basically, we're going to start with the Heat Ready Schools initiative. Schools prepared for heat, and it's part of the resilience program we're launching now in the natural disasters. So what we want to do is to co-finance investments that improve resilience in the educational system. And the focus will be in the reconditioning of these schools to reduce the temperature in the classrooms and also to have a strategic planning when facing extreme weather conditions. So these studies, once again, and Carola called us to use evidence. And here I want to share additional evidence. The evidence shows that to recondition schools for heat resilience means there's a return of $4 for each dollar we invest. This is a very effective investment. So the Ready Schools investment will incentivize education and compensate the results. So this means that they will give financing in the measure that the schools start reaching the conditions that are established in order to assure the impact of the investments we're performing. And with that, we're also generating incentives for a better impact. So we're supporting the IDB in resilience activities in other countries, in education, in Salvador, Barbados, Rio Grande Azul, and Brazil, as part of a multilateral effort to help the country strengthen their resilience and to prepare all of us when facing natural events and mitigating extreme weather events. With that, we wish to foster resilience and to share this with many other programs. So in conclusion, education is key for the development of every country's economy. We all know that. But it's not just access, it's quality, and it's also about guaranteeing a resilience when facing extreme heat and natural disasters, which is what we're doing with this program. So our alliances with Education Above All and Fundación Chile are helping us advance in this objective, and we will continue to do so in a decisive manner in the next few years. The initiative Heat Ready Schools is an important step in this direction, and once again, thank you for hosting us today to be able to show this program, which is truly important. Thank you.
Muchísimas.
Thank you very much, Vice President Ibanez, for your kind words. And now, with this round of welcoming words, we officially inaugurate this important event. And to give a little bit of context to the conversation, I'd like to invite everybody to watch this brief
Los
video.
estudiantes no podrán asistir a la escuela,
Y si asisten, no lograrán aprender lo necesario.
pero hay soluciones que pueden mejorar las condiciones térmicas en el aula y garantizar la continuidad en el aprendizaje.
1. Invertir en edificios escolares con infraestructura resiliente, como el uso de techos reflectantes, o la promoción de ventilación cruzada y el uso de sombra natural pueden reducir la temperatura en las aulas hasta en 10 grados centígrados.
2. Flexibilizar el calendario escolar para evitar los días y horas más calurosas puede reducir hasta el 60% la exposición de los estudiantes al calor extremo durante la jornada escolar.
3. Implementar planes de adaptación incorporando información y datos a los procesos de planificación para mejorar la capacidad de respuesta de los sistemas educativos. Fortalecer la resiliencia de nuestras escuelas y proteger a nuestros estudiantes del calor extremo no solo es esencial para que los estudiantes puedan aprender.
Es una oportunidad para repensar la educación, la infraestructura y el calendario y la planificación educativa.
Adoptar soluciones innovadoras y sostenibles no es solo una necesidad.
Es una apuesta por el presente y el futuro.
Video para
So this video is so that we could contextualize the issues that we're going to be tackling today, this afternoon, and also so we could set the basis for our next conversations. Valerie Salas, a young student from Peru, is going to present the perspective of new generations with regards to the extreme heat and the natural disasters that are affecting specifically education, and at the same time she'll show us the potential of youth in decision-making to be able to build based on this learning experience. And to that end, we invite her then to come up and to be a part of this conference, Fighting Hate, the Next Generations Challenge. A round of applause for Valerie Salas.
Bienvenida, Valerie.
Welcome, Valerie. Hi, everybody. Thank you. Well, I'd like to start with a dynamic, so everybody please close your eyes. And don't cheat, because I'm watching you. So just imagine is that you are now in the Amazon. So it's 2 p.m. and heat is very intense. You're sitting in your chair trying to pay attention to what's being discussed on the board in the classroom, and you could feel sweat running down your face. And even though you're able to concentrate, you feel this pulsating headache and you can't. So now imagine you're in the city. Now you're trying to get to school with a horrible heat, and when you breathe, you feel how pollution makes your breath feel acid in the air, and you're tired and sweaty because last night you weren't able to sleep well due to the heat. Likewise, you're in the classroom, your body is present, but your mind isn't. And finally, imagine you're in the Caribbean.
Y están viendo cómo
And you're seeing how the hurricane season is affecting your city, your community, your school once again. So now open your eyes. Tell me, how did you feel? Scared, fearful, unsafe, insecure? These are the feelings that young youth, boys and girls, feel in our region in Latin America and the Caribbean. Because in fact, 9 out of 10 children are in vulnerable areas in Latin America and the Caribbean exposed to natural disasters and even diseases like AIDS and dengue. And this affects us from the north to south of the Caribbean and Latin America.
And however, when we speak about Latin America and the Caribbean, which is such a complicated area, and we speak about education, we talk about those large gaps in the challenges that we have as a region, such as infrastructure, financing, and the equipment that is found in classrooms, and sometimes the lack of information technology in these classrooms. But today, I want to talk to you about a silenced enemy. He's an enemy who is able to take over all of these gaps and intensify them. And in just 1 minute, you can see and actually take back the progress that we've done in decades. Or I'm not even talking about the pandemic or artificial intelligence. I'm talking about an enemy that we have lived with for years. And this has allowed us to underestimate him and also normalize it. And they are natural disasters.
But
For thousands of students in Latin America, the natural disasters aren't natural. They are recurrent and they are their reality.
our
Here, today. And classes started this month, and it's not about the heat being uncomfortable. It's about that when there is a natural disaster and it attacks, schools close, basic services close, and the teenage girls and boys lose the opportunities that they have that they're not going to be able to regain. For every degree that the temperature goes up, we do lose quality of education. So when there is a disaster, the family loses their sustainability and their work. Education stops being a priority. And this is why it's important that when a school closes, many times a lot of the students don't return. I am from Lima. I am from Peru. And the pictures that you can see here, they are not pictures from a newspaper. They are not pictures from the last news flash that you've seen. These are pictures from my city and specifically my house. This is my house in Lima, and there was a huaico a couple of years ago.
my God.
I was studying and my neighbors called and they told me what had happened. I had to listen to my grandmother, who was 89 years old at the time, crying because she had seen how all of our house memories and pictures of when we were little, the pictures from her wedding and everything, just what it didn't leave, it had left absolutely useless. So how do you get over a disaster? How do you continue to advance and move forward? I would like to tell you that I do have a magic recipe, but the truth is I don't. The only words that resonate with me after having lived that experience is resilience and planification. I was lucky enough that this disaster didn't take away the opportunity to be able to keep learning and follow up with my education. But not everybody in Latin America and the Caribbean have this opportunity. So what can we do so that all of us have the same opportunities? This is where you come in. Because the youth in Latin America and the Caribbean, we need you to do your homework. What we need are policies for planification for every school to see how we're going to respond when faced with the next natural disaster and how we're preparing. We obviously need investments. These are investments for our schools to be able to resist from the strongest rains up until the most severe droughts. We do need curriculum because we do need to know what's happening around us. And it's not the same thing what's happening in the coast, like the city that is in the desert, or what's happening in the Andes or in the Amazon. So we do need education about natural disasters starting on day one. Investing in education and a resilient education towards natural disasters is not an expense. It is the best and most important investment for Latin America and the Caribbean. Because if we believe that the education has to be the motor of development in our region, we have to invest today and now. And I know that this sounds like a cliche, but for me, education changed my life. I come from a family that believed in education for 3 generations. My grandmother was the first woman in my family to be able to go to school. My mother was the first woman to be able to go to the university. And today, I am the first woman in my family who is getting a postgraduate degree in Oxford, England. But all of this would not have been possible without a great teacher who changed my life. this professor or this teacher who said that I shouldn't finish my education or stop getting educated just because I lost so much in this natural disaster that tore my house down. And this teacher was my mother. My mother has been a teacher for over 30 years now, and I would like to say that she has been an inspiration to me, so that today I am here in front of you. So please, don't forget about the role that people have, especially the teachers in our region, to be able to implement all of the homework that you have. The teachers are fundamental pillars in our communities, and they are in charge of the future of our region. So we do need alliances between civil society, the private sector, and also the public sector so that all of these actions can be implemented. But we also need the teachers as agents of change. They are on the front line. Education, as you can see for me, is a very personal issue. It comes from my family. So just to finish off, I would like everybody to close their eyes one more time. And I would like for you to remember maybe many, many years ago when you were in school, when you had friends, and when you started studying and going to the universities that you went to, the classes that you went to, and all of the things that you did. And I want you to think also about those youths, the future ministers, future decision makers that are in these same classrooms. And I want you to ask yourselves, what can we do today so that they can have the same opportunities that you and I both have had? Let's not allow natural disasters to be able to steal the most basic right, the right to be able to learn and have a better future. Class is over, but the change starts now. Thank you. And now, in order to continue, we are going to invite the first panel of this evening, impulsing resilient schools to be able to protect education. This panel is going to be able to look at the strategies and the necessary investments to be able to create schools that are prepared for heat waves, or extreme heat, as we saw in the video, and also for natural disasters, which guarantee around safe education and also being able to allow the students the necessities that they need in order to be able to take advantage of the opportunities in emerging industries. So now to start off this conversation, I have the honor to invite our panelists today on the stage. So I'm going to invite Jose Mauricio Pineda, the Minister of Education from El Salvador. Welcome. We're also going to invite Rociel Soares, the Secretary of Education in Pará, Brazil. Welcome to our stage and our panel. We're also going to invite Joaquin Walker, the Executive Secretary for the Plan of Education Reactivity for the Ministry of Education in Chile. Hello, welcome. And of course, we're going to invite our moderator on this opportunity, Valentina Quiroga, the Vice President of Capital Humano in Fundación Chile. Valentina, welcome. And I'm going to leave you the stage. Hello, everybody. Good afternoon. We are a little bit behind schedule, but this can only get worse. We're going to try to be able to have a conversation. So about all these conversations and the videos that we've been able to see today that motivate us. So what do we do? What do we do when faced with these great challenges that today we are having? So what we're going to talk about today in this panel is mainly what type of strategies can we visualize and what are we doing with concrete examples in different countries that today are being represented here in this panel to be able to also face these challenges that, Valerie has explained very graphically and told us about. There are many students who are living the situation. So I would like to tell you, well, you were already introduced, but let me give you a little bit more information. We are with Jose Mauricio Pineda. He is the Minister of Education in El Salvador. Minister Pineda has over 20 years of experience in governmental public, and he has had high charges in education and health areas, including his role as the Director of Planification in the Ministry of Education and also the General Manager at the Institution of Health. Thank you so much for this invitation. Again, a round of applause. We are also here with Rociel Soares. Did I pronounce that okay? Okay. He is the Secretary of Education in Pará, Brazil. And Secretary Soares is an expert in policies and educational reforms. He was also the Minister of Education in Brazil. He has had very key roles in the education sector, including his role as the Secretary of Education and also the Vice President of the National Council for the state secretaries. He was also in the educational reform. He had a very key role, and the curriculum for childhood and middle and early education. Welcome. And also, we have Joaquin Walker Martinez, who is the Executive Secretary for the Plan of Reactivation in the Ministry of Education in Chile. He is a lawyer from the Catholic University here in Chile with a Master's of Public Policies in Oxford. He has been the director of organizations that are very important in our country, for example, Elige Educar. And also, he has been, for those of you who are local, he is a leader in education issues. He was also the head of the Federation in Education, and he has also been here in national debates.
So then let's start this conversation here. And well, as we've seen before in what we've seen and what we've heard in the videos, today we're facing an important challenge associated to the increase in temperature and natural disasters. In particular, and sorry for referring to our country, but it's what we have as the closest example. We've had a lot of them in the last year, and they've only become more intense each year. So we've had hail, activity in volcanoes, tsunamis, etc. Hurricanes we really don't get here. But, well, in any case, this goes beyond the type of a disaster, whatever it may be. Without a doubt, it does affect children, boys and girls in our region. So then, just to start off the conversation, I just wanted to start off with Minister Pineda to get to know how you were strengthening the level of resilience in the education system and what measures today you're taking to be able to adapt schools to extreme temperature and, of course, other natural risks. Well, thank you very much. I would like to thank the IDB for the kind invitation, Fundación Chile for hosting us here. And if we talk about such an important issue, we mustn't, well, be romantic and evade focusing on what's important. And this has been left aside for so many years. Also, I'd like to thank education above all for the opportunity of getting to know the reality of some of the countries here. And of course, Valerie, thank you very much for this wonderful dedication of words. And when we dare giving a voice, a microphone to youth, we learn so much. And here in the afternoon, independent from all the knowledge that we have acquired, having heard your testimony, having heard your expectations, Valerie, has been an enormous win for us all. So thank you very much for that contribution. Well then, as we just said a few minutes ago, the relation between resilience and education is bilateral. So for many years we've been talking about climate change, but we've done very little in educational changes. So this is really pertinent because if we have an educational system which is much more resilient, we're going to have less kids that abandon school, at least due to the conditions of the school. Now, I could talk about my country, as you well said. where we do have educational centers that never should have been educational centers because they do not fulfill the minimum requirements for them to be an educational center or for the learning to be effective. So this is something very important to talk about and to look at as a problem. The education of our children to be able to build a world, a country, a society which is much more resilient, right? It's very difficult to be able to stop the effects of climate change without that. Independent whether it's man-made or if it's a natural effect of the planet itself, we're not going to be able to stop that. What we must do is propose alternatives, plan respectively in an efficient way, and to build educational systems which are much more resilient. So El Salvador, it's been 2 years now since we started a holistic reform of the educational system where we have incorporated resilience as part of climate change. And here it touches upon at least one of these 5 points that we're going to follow with. Infrastructure must be resilient and must be sustainable. In our educational centers, we're using technology which are adaptive. We're in the process of rebuilding more or less over 3,700 educational centers, and we're going to work towards that. So now an educational center must fulfill with not just holding our students, but also they must give dignity to all kids and all humans, giving them the necessary conditions, the floors, the roof, having bathrooms that are environmentally friendly, and that also we're able to use technologies for those places where there aren't, for example, drainage, and that we're able to install biodigesters, but to have them truly be environmentally friendly. So it's important to have the air, more water in our hydro systems. So we have to see how we install the rainwater harvest systems and bathrooms that are eco-efficient. So the traditional bathrooms where you use it and you just let water go, you use 8 liters of water per flush. A bio-efficient bathroom uses less than a liter of water per flush. So the infrastructure is truly important, and also regulation and planning is important for the adaptation to climate. So this is also important. We, from the arrival of the president to the government, we have designed a manual which allows us to have within that an adaptation plan to climate change. So El Salvador is one of these places where 99% is vulnerable. So any type of climate risk, any type of those rains and earthquakes that arrive will cause huge amounts of damage to the infrastructure. So we must build educational systems that are resilient. So we have also created a manual for the building of educational systems which hold the highest structural standards for the construction of these educational centers. We have created, just as we said before, a guide and a plan for school protection when facing any one of these emergencies. We're not going to be able to avoid this. We have to be prepared. We have to plan for this, and we have to adapt to these emergencies. So then, there's also an important component in the definition and the creation of a curricula that tackles climate change and resilience from the educational content itself, and to not just leave that behind as something that happened. So it's important to have that adequate curriculum, and also it's important to educate the professors and teachers to be able to apply this curriculum. So we have had already almost 6,000 teachers that have been educated on how to act before any type of catastrophe that can arrive. We've implemented diploma programs that come and are based on the high levels of health required for educational establishments and the prevention of any one of these climate systems and changes that can affect us. I think that El Salvador, as we said before, is a country that's highly vulnerable, and it's on its way for an educational redefinition, and that it must be able to contain our students for much longer, and we need to cover this gap not just in El Salvador, but in many of the countries of Latin America. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Minister. Right then, without a doubt, this is a reality and challenge that we are living through in Brazil. So, Secretary, the IDB and Educational Wall are launching a new initiative that already introduced Ana Maria in the schools, heat-ready schools. So, and Para will be the first state to implement this. So then, why is this such an important, relevant step in the Amazons, and how is the Secretary working to be able to tackle these challenges? So, and also to add to that question, I would say, how is financing provided by the IDB to this program and the future provisions given by Education for All to the state? What is the level of support and what does it mean? I'm going to speak in Portuguese. I'm going to talk slowly, but it will be understandable. So then, good afternoon, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here. I'd like to thank the IDB for the kind invitation, all the team for that, and Chunk Cause from Brazil, and also the accompaniment given in the projects. I also would like to congratulate Education Above All, who is giving the next important steps. Now, Para is a state the size of a country with 9 million inhabitants in a territory where all Western Europe can fit inside. And logically, we have a challenge to the fact that we're a state in the north in the Amazon area where there's lots of drought and heat waves that we're going through that many times reach areas that are, well, the sacred areas for us, which is something that affects learning. So then, there are some important pillars that this project has in relation to what the state of Pará is doing. So first of all, we want schools to be more resilient and to be prepared for this and to see how we can build and construct a building, because of course it's very nice to say that, but we're talking about a building that was built 30, 40 years ago in a poor position. So there's no possibility of crosswinds. So when we're constructing a new building, there's another level of planning, but when it's installed capacity, it's another challenge. So that here we talk about finding and putting into practice sustainable models that are financially possible and that they can be done at scale and with speed. So every month that goes by, we lose the possibility of having a better learning experience. So the infrastructure is fundamental in the state of Pará. And this is a case that helps Brazil, just as we want to learn from other places as well. Something important in this process is that we're not just looking at infrastructure as fundamental pillars. It's not the only thing. Pará is a state that already has, as we said before, challenges in placing environmental education for climate change is something that's mandatory in the curriculum. Wow. And in the case of Brazil, it's part of a curricular requirement, at least one class a week. With everybody educated for that, we develop educational materials, specific books, be it physical and digital, to be able to tackle this issue with kids from the age of 6 onwards. So we're talking about a state that already made a decision. And just like science is important, math is important, the environmental issue is cross-cutting. And for our society, it's a vertical issue. Just like there's time for math, and just like when you teach Portuguese and any type of curricular component, the challenge is here because we see that this is very important, especially for the archipelago Marajo. Our rivers in the south of Pará, which is another biome, it's not enough to talk about the transformation and resilience if we do not prepare the students for that, if we don't prepare the professionals for that. So this is a challenge that's in our curriculum, and we believe that this project, Education Above All, will be able to do that. With the IDB, we can promote that because there's no written material yet. There's no sufficient development of materials or the ways of organizing. So then, I've talked about tragedies that we've had in Brazil. I was born in Rio Grande in the South. Porto Alegre suffered one of the greatest tragedies, and this is the third year that we've had climate change that has been felt intensively. I could talk about the Amazon River, where we see the greatest drought in the history of the Amazons. And it's not just the rivers drying, but also the drought means that there's a loss of transport, sustainability, loss of life. Not just for the people that work and live there, but all these people are not protected. So they're not going to go to school, obviously. Just as an example, when the drought affected the state of Pará in the Amazons, or being Secretary of Education, we weren't even able to know where the kids are because the drought was so strong and so intense that families left to any other place.
For total isolation, and there was no type of protocol that was developed about how to act. So being able to plan and seeing the infrastructures and be able to teach about this is fundamental. Always be prepared. Here in Chile, there's a lot of experience about some natural disasters that we don't know about in Brazil, because in Brazil, for example, we just don't have them. If we talk about earthquakes in Brazil, we don't know. We had one earthquake, but it was around 3 or 4 degrees. It was incredible. And in Chile, this is something that is so common and happens so often. So the buildings are also very well prepared. So in Brazil, it could happen because even the low-level buildings, I mean, not even these lower-level earthquakes have gone, but even the heat and the droughts affect us much more now. So what is the protocol for action? How can we help and support teachers in Porto Alegre and Rio Grande del Sur? Just to finish off, the emotional support for the professionals in education systems, they had to be able to support emotionally. It was very complex, but even the professionals, they lost all of their pictures and all of the things from their family. And so these are things that need to be able to discuss and prepared, because when we lose the memories, we end up more affected and we can't support. The tragedy is much larger. And about financing, COP is going to be in Pará. You are all invited, obviously. I am very grateful to be here speaking about this, but we cannot avoid speaking about financing. We're looking for a solution around the world for financing and to be able to combat climate change. There's not one single discussion about this kind of resource without saying how does this help support the adaptation for schools for climate change. Thank you so much for the IDB and also Education Above All for putting this topic on the table. But it's very important for Latin American countries and in the Caribbean to be able to add the subject into other areas in the Ministry of Finance and with economists that are discussing where the money is going. If we understand that learning is essential and that climate changes are affecting us, then financing has to be a subject that we need to talk about to be able to support education so that we can be prepared to take care of the children. Thank you. So now we are seeing how infrastructure and planification are acquiring a different level of depth. We're getting to know the experience and the realities of each country. And Carola and Hernan had also mentioned this in Chile. This isn't a debate that maybe we had been such a priority in our conversation, but being able to listen to the experiences of other countries, at least that's happening to me, is that I do believe that we have several tools that we have been able to develop talking about natural disasters. We do have a very long history in that. So I would like to ask you, Joaquin, if you are bringing you into the national context, what is it, or how is resilience being integrated in our education system, and what measures are you taking to be able to adapt schools for extreme heat in some regions that we have, and also natural disasters? Well, good afternoon, everyone. I would like to say hello, obviously, to the representatives and the management for Fundación Chile and Education Above All, the IDB, and UNESCO Regional Director. And also would like to say hello. This is just it's so late. Everybody is so resilient. So thank you for being here today and for your patience. And actually, this is a new topic that we have actually been avoiding in Chile. This is a country that is significantly affected by natural disasters. Actually, in this moment right now, there is a fire that is affecting 3 different regions in the country. And today there are 6,000 students that are out of school because of forest fires. In this same moment, this isn't a hypothesis. We're talking about a reality that is hitting us, and it's very sensitive for this country. And in this line also, we seek to be able to maintain the education system and maintain it stable and help for the students to be able to go to class. The ministers had just spoke about this, but we want them to be in class, especially in the sectors that are most excluded. And I couldn't not mention an anecdote we were written to from UNESCO, so that we were able to report the advances of the different indicators of the ODCE-4. And so we can see how the rates have gone down for students that are out of school. And I'm saying this because we're pretty self-flagellant in Chile, and it was very difficult or important to be able to communicate for the rate to go down from 7th and 8th grade, for example, from out of school from 3.2% in 2013 to which was the last comparable date. The last measurement that we have of the link between Chile, so people who were in schools and now they came out of this education system, we had a dropout percentage that was significant. This talks about a resilient educational system, and we want to be able to safekeep and be able to talk about this during crisis of climate. We would also like to tell you, for those of you who aren't local, or maybe those of you who don't know, in 2022, we were able to approve, as a state, a framework law for climate change. And so here the focus is on being carbon neutral and the resilience in the climate in 2050. This has to mandate all of the governments to be able to take charge of this. This also includes the Ministry of Education. And so starting from there, the Ministry of Education in Chile created the framework for integral sustainability and also the adoption of the problems associated to climate change. So here, I see a lot of people who are related to education. We were talking about a lot of people who are here from civil society. And while I was talking about this framework or studying this framework, this needs to be spoken about. Very few people know that we have this framework, which offers the educational system a tool in learning to be able to work from what we do in the Ministry of Education, the development of skills for resilience. And within this framework, I'm just going to say the headlines and then I'm going to stop. It has 4 axes of institutional. For example, one is how we can work resilience from learning, including it taking our own tools, our curriculum, our management, the SMEs. I don't want to start to diverge too much. The capacities, the development capacities and innovation forming schools for this focus. And also, I want to just stop on one for a little bit longer, Valentina, which is how we take on the way that we teach and learn in order to be able to develop skills, to be able to adapt to a dynamic and changing world. And so here, this framework that I ask you to review in sustainability.mineduc.cl, we can share it later for the people who are here. It focuses mainly on that. I kind of want it to be the headline of this, and now I swear to God, I'll be quiet. But it's from the hope and from the role of the students as agents of change to be able to take on the climate change. We're in a context of eco-anxiety with new generations. They have deep anxiety, and this is because the world is falling apart because of the climate crisis. And so this is generating great challenges in our generations. And if we start talking about it from a pessimistic view and from catastrophic points of view, then we have to inspire the students to take charge. And this framework, it offers the students tools, learning tools, to be able to adapt to a changing world by being agents of change. So I know that we've been here for a little bit longer than we should, but thank you so much for this space. They're telling me that we have gone too deep into the time. So I'm going to ask all three of you for support so that we can make a great effort and see if we can. We have one last question for each one of you and see if we can just have a 1-minute answer. I think that we've already talked about a lot of these elements. So without a doubt, the importance to achieve resilience is very important, that different financing mechanisms have and also technical support that are sustainable in time. So I would like to go back to El Salvador and ask where a new project is being done. This is a pilot program. This is based on results. And the purpose of it is to be able to develop the capacities that are necessary to be able to access financial investment in green areas. So I would like to ask you, Minister, also to congratulate you for the possibility of this project being implemented. So why is it so important? You have 30 seconds. No, I'm kidding. You have 60. But why is it so important to adapt schools to high heat? So this is just going to be very short. With this program that we are developing right now, Be Climate, which we're developing, it also has other components that are very interesting, but I'm just going to focus on this. We're going to continue to improve the infrastructure in schools in order to be able to make them more resilient to climate. So even with the project that we're executing right now, we are reconstructing schools because they're saying that the Minister of Pará was saying it's not the same thing to build a new one than to build one that's already there. It does have huge challenges, but we are doing all of the efforts so that there is ventilation, to be able to put solar panels on the school, and also so that the bathrooms are eco-friendly. We're installing biodigesters, and also this is to be able to turn the feces that before they were latrines, and now we can turn them into washable rooms. And so this feces can be methane gas, and then the schools will no longer cook with wood, they'll cook with gas, and etc. So there's plenty of things that are definitely going to be strengthened with this program, with Bid Clima. And it's also going to impulse the work of our direction of infrastructure through different types of actions. The first one that we're going to see as an effect that is going to expand is the technologies that are now available, but sometimes we don't know about them, and make them sustainable. And that will allow us to continue executing these types of works and that they are friendly with the environment. And finally, it's going to strengthen the tools for environmental monitoring. So this will also allow for us to measure the impact of these interventions and also be able to guarantee the improvements and have them be constant throughout time. I tried to be as specific as possible. Thank you so much. So now we're going to continue with this conversation going back to Pará. So, Secretary, you were mentioning the intervention during your prior intervention, the importance that these topics are are made a priority in global agendas that go further than just the educational system, right? So the education to have the political pressure and make it a part of the conversation. So in this sense, considering that this year the COP30 is going to be in Berlin, how strategic are these steps that are being taken, and how do they contribute to the more wide objectives of this project? First, having spaces like these and institutes like the IDB and the Education Above All and some other institutions that maybe we belong to, that we're here talking about this topic and trying to be heard in other tables so that it's not always the same people who are talking about this. This is already a very important step. COP 30 will have a very important mission with some very important pillars for climate change, especially during the hardest and challenging times in a world full of wars and governments are changing. So this is part of it, but it's something that we do have to understand is that education has to be the priority. The first thing that is affected and the one with the least fault are the kids. They're the ones that learn the least. They don't have financing. They don't have the conditions. So we do actually have to make a much faster change because the longer we take, the least likely we are to be able to make this change, which is why COP30 in Berlin has been thought out as from the government and the state of Pará to be able to give it some protagonism. And the state of Pará decided to make a change, first in our curriculum, but also in being able to bring this into all of the spaces. It's very important that you come to Pará and that you participate with us and not just give it one day for education. This happens in all of the clubs for the past couple of years, and we only have one day based on education. And the majority of the authorities have already left. The tables with presidents and ministers, they've never heard the word education in any single one of these instances. So it looks like everybody goes and they take pictures and their obligations, but not because we actually believe in it. And so since this is going to continue like this, we're not going to have any changes. So when we understand that the Minister of Finance is going to carry out education investments, it's going to mean a return in the future. It was already mentioned that every dollar invested, we have a return on $4, which any other investment, there's no other that will give us such great return. The truth is that it probably hasn't even been calculated how education is going to generate in the investment, especially for education above all. It works. There's a lot of works that happen in Pará where we can see how many millions or thousands of students that aren't going to school, that skip school, and just having one climatized school and prepared for this is going to improve and make this a home. So school should be able to receive these investments, but this isn't being discussed.
All of this goes beyond that, beyond the natural budget, and there's an international world fund to be able to fight against climate change so that the future generations can enjoy having more awareness, but also we require greater management of this in Berlin. What we want to do is to have the boys, girls, and youth to have space to be able to talk about this, and then we're going to have other youth that will, if he talks at the end, I met him in Azerbaijan, one of the best meetings that I've had in the last few months here. So we're going to have him talking a bit more, just so you could understand why it's important to have children talking with the authorities, because they're the ones that are going to affect the changes. And as we could see, we need to open our doors. So I'd like to thank everybody for their work, the IDB, the Education Above All Foundation, and to carry out these changes. So we need to know about this. And in the future, perhaps we won't have time for these changes. Thank you very much. Well then, without a doubt, we have a huge role to play amongst us all. So we can make sure that education is a priority in this agenda. So then finally, Joaquin, in the last few minutes, I'd like to ask, well, without a doubt, this already appeared in the conversation, the importance of infrastructure, not just that, but education, curriculum, and how we motivate everybody, and how the population is a key player in this. And, well, here we want to know what policies have been available to help these students with these necessary skills for adaptation. So 3 initiatives and something that's coming. What is the socio-emotional education, which is part of the educational reactivation plan, which I need to coordinate and collaborate in, which is a fundamental program for creation of resilience. And we need the education for the professors. I don't want to pause here too long due to time restraints. But number 2 is pedagogical innovation, to teach and learn in a way that we could work with in our teams and to be able to solve problems and work on projects. For example, we're working on Protagonistas del Cambio. It's an executing entity that seeks students to solve problems, many of them linked to environment, and a third one in educator education. And we have Buscar Chile from Fundación Chile, where we tackle specifically development of tools for professors to be able to talk about socio-emotional tools. The Futuro Técnico Network, where we're educating educators in the sense in education innovation for the solution of problems. And the logic behind this that advances towards resilience. And what's coming is curricular authorization. We're working with ministries for accreditation that focuses on the development and social development. And as innovation, there is a cross-cutting objective in tackling the abilities for climate change. And they go into these, and this is an important ability which should be used as a tool for the challenges we're facing now. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Joaquin. And Minister, Secretary, Minister, for these kind words and critical thought. Of course, we have a challenge in doing this, and we need to continue having these places for meeting and discussing this. And this is of the utmost importance, because if we have collective intelligence, we will be much more effective and efficient in the response given. Thank you very much. So we'd like to thank our panel, and now we will proceed with our next panel. In this case, we're going to request everybody to come. Ahora vamos a continuar con el siguiente panel y apreciamos la oportunidad de que sea corto y rápido para continuar con la entrevista y disfrutar del cóctel. So now we're going to continue with our next panels, and we're going to talk about this subject, resilient education. This discussion will be focused on the fundamental role of alliances for innovative solutions and to foster resilience when facing natural disasters and heat. So we're going to invite our next panel member. We'd like to invite Dr. Mary Joy Bigotzi, Executive Director of Educate a Child Program, Education Above All. Also, we'd like to invite Esther Cuish, Regional Director for Latin America and the Caribbean from UNESCO. And also Avinash Prasad, Special Advisor to the IDB President. Ahora en inglés, quiero darle la bienvenida al panel. Doctora Mary Joy Pigozzi, Directora Ejecutiva del Programa Educar a un Niño, EAA. Esther Cuich, Directora Regional para América Latina y el Caribe, UNESCO. Y el moderador, Avinash Prasad, Asesor Especial del Presidente del BID. Avinash, it's yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
I'm very excited by being joined by Mary Jo Bigozzi and Esther Krausch, two important thinkers and actors in the space of making education more resilient. I'm also mindful it's late. In one of my previous jobs, I used to be the speechwriter for Prime Minister Mia Mottley of Barbados. And whenever I gave her a 20-minute speech, she would always make it 5 hours and 20 minutes. So I know we enjoy speaking in this region, but we're going to be short and to the point. So we know where we are after what you've heard already. Our region is the most impacted by extreme heat, as measured by numbers of days of extreme heat. This is having a huge educational impact. It's equivalent to, in some places in our region, our kids losing 1 to 2 years, full years of education. And that's also having an impact on their life outcomes, their earning potential, on what they can achieve. And so we need to make our kids heat ready, our schools heat ready, our curriculums heat ready, our systems heat ready. What are the challenges? Why are we not doing more? So I want to begin with Esther and ask you about partnerships. You're an expert on partnerships. Is part of the problem that we need to partner with all these different groups, that it's not just education, it's education and health and environment and finance. And in your experience, how do we get these partnerships to be effective?
Well, that's a 5-hour question, but well, let me tell you a little bit about an initiative that UNESCO is the secretariat of. It's the Greening Education Partnership. This is a partnership that was launched in 2022, and the idea was really to take a whole-of-system approach to the issue of climate change and making sure that we deliver the kind of education that will enable learners of all ages to be able to tackle interconnected global challenges such as climate change, such as loss of biodiversity, such as the unsustainable use of resources, but also things like inequality. And how do we connect the dots? And how do we ensure that learners are able to take informed decisions and take action? And so we launched this partnership in 2022. I think now we have more than 97 countries and over 1,700 organizations that are part of this partnership. And I think, coming to your question, part of the challenge is how do we find common ground? How do we actually define what we're talking about? How do we come up with common language? Which is not easy when you have so many different partners. And so I think when we talk about greening education, we need to take an interdisciplinary approach. We need to make sure that we tackle these subjects, not just from a scientific point of view, but also the social, the economic, the behavioral point of view. And so this partnership basically looks at 4 different pillars. One is greening schools. The second one is greening the curriculum. The third one is greening teacher training and also looking at the capacity of education systems. And the fourth one is about greening communities, which is really about how do we bring in the whole community through lifelong learning initiatives. And so across those 4 pillars, what we've been able to do is to define the terms. What does it mean to have a green school? What does it mean to have a green curriculum? So I think that in itself is already quite an achievement, having the same language. Then we came up with targets, with objectives. What do we want to reach? And so one of the goals, which is very important, is to reach that at least 50% of all schools in all countries are green by 2030. And so we've been developing guidelines on how to green schools, how to green curricula, and we're also monitoring the inclusion of ESD principles here in the region, for example. We actually do that from our office, the UNESCO office here in Santiago. We look at 3rd grade and 6th grade curricula to see how they've incorporated these concepts, and so we try to monitor what's being done. So I think a lot is being done, but it's not easy. And there are challenges both at the global level and at the local level.
So I can see how we need to help governments speak to governments, ministries speak to ministries. What about the challenge of ministries getting down to the school level and that communication of partnership between ministry right down to the individual schools?
So at the school level, I think we see different challenges. One is that there's often many different ministries involved and also other actors. So there might be the Ministry of Education that comes down with certain initiatives, but also the Ministry of Health, the Ministry of Environment, the Ministry of Social Affairs, the Ministry of Infrastructure when it comes to greening the infrastructure. And often there's no coordination between those ministries. And so at the school level, there's often not a coherent strategy of how to approach this. So I think that's one big challenge. Another big challenge as well is that we need to focus on the teachers and making sure that they have the right tools to be able to address this. Because we put a lot of onus, let's say, on the teachers, but we're not necessarily giving them the tools to work with. And I think a last challenge perhaps is also looking at how do we ensure, sorry, because I'm losing my train of thought, how do we ensure that we have coherence between what we teach and what we do? Kind of a practice of what you preach. Because sometimes we're teaching about sustainable practices, we're teaching about all kinds of things, climate action, you know, about how to recycle, how to do this, that, and whatnot. But then you're in a school where there are no sustainable practices. You're in a school building that's not resilient. So how do you, you know, I'm a parent, and I'm sure many of you are parents, and we often say that little kids learn more from what you do than what you say. So you cannot have a teacher in the class trying to teach things and then sitting in an environment that is totally unsustainable and that is not doing any of the things that we're teaching them. So I think those are some of the challenges that we see at the school level.
So Mary Joy Pagozzi, I think in these uncertain times, everybody needs joy as their middle name. How part of the challenge is developing countries, ministries, they have lots of pressing demands. And this stuff is expensive. So how do we partner with others and collaborate with others to try and make this, how do we incentivize and make ministries prioritize and do more in the area of heat readiness?
Thank you very much. I actually don't think we can make ministries do anything, but we can help them. And I think we don't do enough of that. We haven't thought through enough of how somehow we are an ecosystem. And we really have to think about the things we do that enable the ecosystem to work better rather than our current practices, which often are not that at all. You asked first about financing. I think there's some real challenges, and even more today than there were perhaps 3 months ago. And particularly for poor communities where the resources were already few. The amount of money is probably not going to change a whole lot. So we're going to have to think about, one, different kinds of partnerships. And I would say, you know, that we have never done well in bringing together government and ODAs and philanthropy. We've never pulled that together well. Now is the opportunity to do that. And I think that we can't also think about it just as money, because nobody wants to be the bank. And particularly coming from the country that I'm working in right now, which is a very wealthy country, to be seen only as the provider of funding is not attractive. We really need to look at ways to say, what is it that philanthropy brings? What is it that the government brings? What is it that the ODAs bring? How can we pull those things together very, very differently than we've been doing so far? Because honestly, if we look back on the last 30 years, we've wasted a whole bunch of money because we've put so much money into things like teacher training and nothing's happening in classrooms. We have to change that. So I think a lot of it is practice, but a lot of it is also thinking differently. And we need, and we talked a little bit earlier, the earlier panel talked about this as well. We don't have to have every class in every village on exactly the same schedule. If children have to work, we need to take that into account. I'm not promoting child labor, believe me. But there are times when children of 12, 13 years old have to help their families because otherwise nobody eats. We need to think about that in education. And we need to figure out how to facilitate that. And it might mean actually helping the parents and not so much the kids, because that may be the way we enable children to not be in child labor. So I think there's some real need for us to rethink. We've got so much. I mean, in education, we have so much. We have so much experience. We have so much knowledge. We have so many good people. We have so much goodwill. And we just don't use it the way we might want to think about it. It's not easy. And you talked about it earlier. It's not easy to bring different people to the table because we all have our ways of doing things and we all have our strategies and we all have our financial requirements. And it's really hard to break away from that and just say, okay, how do we get there? And how can we make it happen? So I think that's one of the issues in the financing that we really need to deal with. It's not to say that money's not the problem. It is a problem, and it's getting to be a bigger problem. But I think unless we start addressing some of that, we're not going to be able to address the bigger problem.
I think this point about a holistic approach, and both of you have talked about that, is very important to take note. Indeed, sometimes when people say, why don't we just close the schools? I worry that, well, in an extreme heat day, and we now have great ability to predict some of these extreme heat days, is that it may be worse at home. We have to think about the wider context that we're operating in. We're very excited at the IDB about the partnership we're doing with you in Para State and with Para State. I think something like 20-odd schools. Hopefully we can push this to a higher number to making them heat ready. Reflective paint, green shading, remodeling airflows, some solar-powered air conditioning. When you look at a partnership like that, what is the criteria that you look at? What encourages you to do even more?
Well, first of all, we're really excited about this opportunity. It's, when you think about climate change, it's just so big. Like, what can we do about it? We're a small foundation. So having an opportunity to actually contribute something is really exciting. Why are we there? So in our foundation, our biggest push is on out-of-school children. We care about getting those who are the furthest behind into a learning program. And what we know is that, and we've looked over our 12-year history of looking at out-of-school children, we know who the kids are that are out of school. In East Africa, kids are ending up being nomads because the family has nowhere to take their cattle or their camels or their goats, so they're on the move. So we know we have to have mobile schools. We know that in some places, we're not going to be able to build a traditional school. There's just not the financing for the number of kids, so we have to think differently. I think what this program does for us is to begin to enable us to practice with some really energized and knowledgeable colleagues and friends to be able to explore some of these ideas, and hopefully we can bring to the table as well some of the ideas that we have seen in our own work and maybe begin to build some new ways of doing business.
So ladies and gentlemen, there you have it. We have to address extreme heat. We have the technology. We need to scale it up. Quite literally, our future depends upon it. And for that scaling up, we need good partnerships. Please thank our partners here today. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much to all of you. And we are going to continue.
We're going to continue this evening with this enriching and also learning opportunities about the urgency and being able to strengthen our education systems to be able to resist extreme heat and natural disasters. And so to finish this event, I would like to invite a very special conversation. I would like to invite two people. One of them is Francisco Vera. He is a student from Colombia, which we're inviting to on stage.
Francisco.
Welcome, Francisco. Y también a Ferdinando Regalia. He is the social sector manager of the IDB. So I'm going to leave you with this very interesting conversation.
¿Con esto?
Stefan is my son. When I was your age, I always insisted that he went to bed before 9. So, first of all, I apologize. This is an exception. It's an exception. It's just one night. So, the truth is that it is a great pleasure. We started with Valerie, and now we're going to close off tonight with Francisco. It is an honor to have you here. So we've discussed many topics that are very important, and it's always been said in the other panels. The youth has to be in the center of this conversation. You're the ones who go to school and also the ones who transform it. So with us tonight, Francisco Vera is here. Now I can do the official presentation. You are 15 years old. They said that you were 14, but you're 15, correct? Yes, I'm 15. So he does have something very special, is that starting off at the age of 9, he founded Guardians of Life, which is a platform to be able to talk about youth rights. And he has lived it in first person, but he's going to tell us about what heat waves do and natural disasters do as far as continuing education. And I wanted to start this conversation off asking for your perspective about what you see are the most important challenges that you feel that your classmates see, and with these high temperatures that have been going on, and also if you can share specific experiences of how these high heats and also natural disasters are how you experience them in your education formation. Well, thank you very much, Ferdinando. Thank you for the space. It's a pleasure to be here today and be able to close off this event today. So what we've seen, the main problem, as Vice President Ana Maria mentioned, is that Latin America and the Caribbean has a lot of structural issues, but also there are these phenomena that occur that are extreme, like high heat waves, and also natural disasters that are affecting us deeply, from our education to our health. Generally, every single aspect of our life is affected. So when these high heats come in, we saw it in a few videos, and we also lived it in first person and saw it through with Valerie. We feel a little bit more irritated. We're so much more vulnerable, and so we also have to talk about this problem, but different natural disasters and heat waves that we face from this perspective. It's biologic at the end of the day, because the children and teenagers, the youths, physiologically and physically, we are much more vulnerable to these types of phenomena, and so we're so much more exposed for heat affecting us, and that our academic performance goes down, and we can't concentrate because we're losing what's so valuable, which is this childhood with a whole education, with quality education, and also with education that allows us to live in and live in spaces that are healthy, that are clean, and that are dignified. And so the ecosystem, trees, forests, and rivers that have water, and so, at the end of the day, it's oceans also with fish, which seems normal, but it's not. So as concrete examples, we have so many. Here we've already talked about, as we've seen many times. I think that this is actually a really good example, because it does show these two sides of the same coin, of the lack of adaptation of our schools and the lack of resilience is such an important word. So last year, the floods in Porto Alegre, they paralyzed the economic and the daily life of so many people in the entire state. And they asked that this was very difficult, and it made it impossible for kids to go to school. And this year, we're seeing the opposite. The heat waves made going back to school got set back a couple of weeks because there is no installations that are adequate enough for us to be able to go to school, and this affects us severely. So, Francisco, let's talk a little bit about the solutions, because the youth here, you are usually much more creative than we are. So there are countries like Indonesia, for example, which have embarked on a structural change. All of the roofs in the schools there, this has proven a complete change of the color of the roofs can actually make the temperature go down up to 10 degrees Celsius in the classrooms. Costa Rica, Ana Maria mentioned the study that is very important with in the introduction. For efficient air conditioning, they went down from 30 to 25 degrees Celsius within the classrooms,
Sustantivo nel rendimento escolar.
and also an increase in academic performance. In your point of view, how can the youth help create or design these solutions for your schools and for the communities? And have you seen a solution that excites you more than another? And finally, the last question, after these 13 hours, we keep saying we need to involve the youth in these conversations, but in reality, you need to be in the middle of the definition of these solutions. What do you think? Well, the truth is that this last one, it's very important because it really is the inclusion of the children and the youths, which are different because we always speak about youth and childhood, but we mix them up and we put them in the same group, but actually they're completely different. Especially if we compare a child who is a couple of months with somebody who's 18 years old, well, the difference is massive. So in that sense, the inclusion is kind of a double-ended knife, because first, it does have to be the center of investments, but also their voice needs to be integrated. So the fact that we are the middle of the conversation, but they need to be within the conversation. And that is how important it is to be able to include youth and children, that they value our voices and that they can consider us when we're making decisions about education, about health, and about our future, and also our present, because we're also talking about children as the future, but more than that, we are also the present. And so the initiatives, there are plenty. I think that we always start seeking for the furthest solutions from our reality, and it seems that these solutions, they're in other galaxies, but no, they are right here in front of us. And I believe that nature, for example, is it's an essential solution. These are key, precisely to be able to reduce the temperature. So trees, real trees that actually purify the air, that reduce the temperature, which is also proven, not just in schools, but also on the streets, in the cities. It's something that we just have to change the entire mentality of how these spaces that we live in are made, and also to be able to close people up or close them to nature. And so our ultimate objective is to be able to empower children, to be able to defend nature. But in order to defend them, first we need to get to know them. We can't just defend things that we don't know. So we also do need to get children close to nature. There's a phrase that says more children in nature and more nature for children. So it's actually a Brazilian quote. But I personally, the students would say this in the last 6 years. I'm very happy because during this month we were able to, it's 6 years that we've been a movement and defending our rights as children from schools and from the territories that we have. We have so many initiatives. For example, we have one with gardens for hope. And so we do have vegetable gardens in schools, not just to be able to face this breach or this gap within our communities and nature, but also being able to strengthen the food safety, which is such a huge issue in our region. So these are solutions that are double. So children basically from 4 different municipalities in Colombia and 450 children. And we have these vegetable gardens, and they actually cultivate them with local seeds, and then they are able to be fed by these same vegetables. And so this creates a link that is so much stronger between an individual and nature.
So I just want to close by asking about that concept that you've mentioned very quickly, the concept of eco-hope. It's something that is a fundamental concept in your actions. For example, in Guardians of Life, Guardianes por la Vida. Could you please explain what that means? if you had to explain it to an old guy like me. So, how do you explain eco-hope, and how do I have to correct my actions so we can build this generation of eco-hope? Yes, totally. So, before it was said that we're facing the most important challenge we could face, which isn't an ecological crisis or that type of crisis, economic crisis, or any other challenge. The largest challenge we could face, of course, is the loss of hope, right? So hope is the last thing you lose. So if we lose hope, well, we don't have anything else to lose if we follow that premise. So many people, especially youth that have a life ahead of themselves, and well, I haven't lost hope yet. The eco-hope I still maintain, and I base my actions on this, but unfortunately youth and all the generations are losing hope, which is necessary to act. So I believe that eco-hope, in effect, is something that's necessary. It's something that's necessary for, on the one hand, to not deny the current situation, because the current situation is complicated. We've seen this. We've had structural challenges, which are challenging, but also we could tackle this. So in our country, we don't say you can't block out the sun with just one of your fingers. The sun is huge. We have to accept that, but we have to base eco-hope on actions, and especially collective actions, which are collective, that involve children and that continue empowering them and to give them education that they need so that they could exercise their citizenship. So it's going to put our citizens in favor of life in a collective fashion. So that's the concept of eco-hope. We talk about concrete things, and during the last few years, we have the concept of Guardianes de la Vida, guardians for life, and we try to protect the territories. We've sown the seeds of more than 2,500 trees, and we've educated leaders, especially as part of the challenges that we have as a society, that fostering of the new generation of leaders for the current and future challenges, which is full of uncertainty, but also eco-hope. We'd like to add education and resilience and eco-hope. Right, thank you. Wonderful. So, we have to continue then. So then, I think we reached the end of this event. We could not have a better ending to the event as we've had now. I'd like to highlight that eco-hope. Well, when I heard you in the videos, it's the opposite of being an ostrich. The ostrich buries its head in the sand and doesn't look at reality. This invites us to look at reality. We've talked about solutions which are totally doable. Obviously, you need financing, but also it's true that we have to do things better than what we're doing now. And above all, what we highlight is that fundamental role that education has, and that it's educating leaders like you and like so many students in the region to tackle the challenges of the world. So then soon the world is going to be in your hands. So the fact is, I'd like to thank you very much for this conversation. I'd like to thank everybody for being here. It's so late. And thank you once again, Fundación Chile and Education above all, for supporting us in this event. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much, Ferdinand and Francisco. Now we're also going to add the concept of eco-hope while we take the photos and while we reflect on education to build a more resilient future. I'd like to thank all of you for your participation. We'd like to invite everybody now to enjoy the cocktail at the closing ceremony so you could talk about this. Thank you very much.